later I'm going to post a photograph from the 1950s for you, and I'm standing more or less in the same position. You can see the Gothic arches of the Kowloon Church over there on the other side of the road, and so you can see that these original trees are still here. And when you look at that photograph, you'll see what I mean about the trees originally standing in their little tree parks in the vehicular carriageway, critically. And again, we can see how this the tree has responded to this 1970s walled planter being built around it by creating a mass of aerial roots over itself, and then later on the small planting area being built maybe about 5 years ago, and some of the aerial roots being trained into it. Over here behind me we can see that they're really spending a bit of money on these. If you've got the cash, and Hong Kong has the cash, then you can do this, right? You can build a substantial steel structure there, which is there to support, to support the branch of this tree. And you can see that the cables, there's a whole system of cables built into this tree. And if I zoom up here, you can see the recent pruning has been done, quite carefully, of some of the branches to reduce the crown a little bit, to reduce the weight of the crown and also the wind loading on the crown. Now this tree is, you can see the foliage is getting a little bit thin. Frankly, I'm not sure how much longer this one's going to hold out, but a lot of money is being spent on it, fixing up these cables. It's a skilled job getting those cables in. So you need a really professional arboriculturalist to do that. And of course it's not cheap to stick in one of these steel structures to support the tree. And you can see that the cables are actually attached to the steel structure and then to the branch. The branches, the steel structure is not touching the branch, right? The steel structure is to support the cables that are attached to the branch, so that you've still got some flexibility, right? There's still some flexibility. The branch can still sway in the wind a little bit, but not to the extent that it's going to snap off, right? Without that structure, you would have to take this tree out, because that branch certainly hanging over the footpath, a very, very busy footpath, it would be a big risk. So anyway, it's interesting. You might be interested in doing the Ian Robinson's course in arboriculture, where he'll go into all of this stuff in more detail. But anyway, there we go. So this goes back to what I was saying about the space. The reason this particular row of original trees has survived, and none of the others have, because this row of trees used to run all the way up Nathan Road until around about the 60s and 70s, when there was so much construction. And so all the other trees died off because of construction damage from new buildings, and in particular the installation of underground utilities. These survived, and because to my left side, right, is Kowloon Park, and so there were no buildings built here. There's this sort of row of shops here, but they're not high-rise, and they're within the boundary of the park. So you've got a footpath here that's like 8 meters wide, right? It's 8 meters from where that truck is on the right to where this storm drain is that I'm just standing next to. I just paced it out. It's about 8. So to the actual shop face, about 10 meters. That's the space you need for this kind of impact. But aren't they wonderful? I mean, they're so magnificent, these trees. So they're well worth investing in. And in fact, to give the government credit where it's due, They are by building these small planters sticking out from the 1970s planters, and you can see here that they're using a piece of bamboo. They're using bamboo and stuffing the bamboo full of compost, so that the aerial roots to guide the aerial roots down into the planting area, and you can see that that's been done in that case and all of those cases, which is why the aerial roots are at an angle, right? They're dead straight and they're at funny angles. Normally the aerial roots, a natural aerial root would be like that, the one just behind this gentleman where he's sitting. You know, that's a natural aerial root which would hang down directly vertically. These other ones which are coming out at funny angles are like that because they were artificially guided by using bamboos like this. They guided the aerial roots down into the planting area, so that's why they're not always straight. But anyway, what this does is it just gives the trees that bit more soil volume, and crucially it helps them to stabilize themselves, to strengthen the structure of the tree. In addition to that, you can see that there are cables, right? You can see that there are cables that have been installed in the trees from one branch to another. So you can see that the cable's up there tied round that branch, and then that cable runs across and is tied round this branch. And you can see that the cables are not tied tight, right? They're loose, but what they do is they stop those branches from splitting apart. It stops the whole tree from splitting apart in a typhoon situation. So I have to say that in these particular cases, the government has made quite a bit of investment into these trees, and it's recognised that these are a public amenity and worth spending some money on. Of course, that's not always the case, but here, in this particular case, it is. I'm still in Nathan Road, looking at these wonderful Ficus microcarpa, and I just want to bring to your attention the size of these things, right? The size of these trees. The crowns reach their extreme right into the middle of the road. So that means that they're reaching, each of those traffic lanes is about 3.5 meters, right? So the center of the tree to the middle of the road is 8 meters. So roughly 8 meters from the center of the tree to the middle of the road. That means that the crown, 1/2 of the crown is 8 meters, and you can see that it reaches the same distance on the other side. So just by eye, I can see that the total width of the crown of this tree is about 16 meters. And just again, looking by eye, it's a little bit taller than that, right, the height. But you can use, of course, get somebody to stand next to the base of the tree, take a photograph from this angle, and calculate more accurately the size of the tree. This is going to be difficult in a situation like on the campus where all the trees are all muddled up together. But the principle is that I want you to, in that assignment, to really have a look at the real size of these trees, not the imaginary size of the trees. Right? These are quite substantial trees. The entire crown, 16 or more meters across. Now I'm in the section of Nathan Road next to Kowloon Park, and you can see here where the bus, the inside lane of the original 3-lane road has now been, in this particular location, retained as a bus lay-by. Now let's have a look around. Let's have a look around here, and here we have these well-known, rather magnificent Ficus microcarpa. Now these are actually the original street trees. Nathan Road was planted with street trees when it was set out around 1920, 100 years ago. And there's a bit of a story going on here. These trees were originally planted in little tree parks, right, in the actual vehicular carriageway. And I will, when I post this video, I'll post some photographs to show you to show you this. So these trees were not actually originally growing in these stone planter boxes. The original curve, you can see in this case the original curve is still there, and in fact the original gutter has been retained. So what happened was that when the MTR was built in the 70s, this entire road was dug up, right? I mean, they dug the entire road up, and they put these they widened. They put a new curb along this section here, and built these dwarf wall planters around the base of the trees, raising the soil level around the trees by, what, 800, nearly a metre. Now, most trees would have been killed by that. Most trees, the bark would have rotted and the tree would have just died with that amount of material filled up around the base of the tree. But these being Ficus microcarpa, they are so tough. So what you can see is the trees have actually come down, they've used their aerial roots to create a completely new root system at the new soil level. So you've got to imagine that that tree was actually planted in the roadway in a little tree park, which I'll show you later. And the aerial roots have come down since the planting area was built. Right, now, and it's created a new root system at the new ground level. Now, only really Ficus microcarpa is capable of doing this. And if you look carefully, you can see the old structure of the tree, the old branches, right? These massive, great big branches, and then the new aerial roots growing over itself. So it's actually creating a new tree over its own self, right? It's quite amazing, right? However, still, even in this planting, in these planters, the soil volume is restricted, and we can see an example over here where the roots of the tree are actually escaping from the planting area, coming over the wall. And by the way, you can see the original road drains there at the edge of the original curb line. In more recent years, like in about the last sort of 5 years or so, in order to preserve these trees and give them a little bit more growing space, these planters, these additional small dwarf wall planters, have been planted in certain places, and the aerial roots of the tree allowed, or actually encouraged, to grow through temporary bamboos into this additional planting area. And the reason for that is to give the tree a bit more soil volume and to stabilize these trees so that the tree can send out more aerial roots and become more stable. Right? Otherwise, this doesn't solve the problem of the restriction of soil, space restriction, but it gives the tree that little bit more space and prolongs its life.